The rain fell in an unrelenting torrent, drumming against the rusted metal skeleton of the abandoned warehouse. The wind howled through shattered windows, carrying the scent of damp earth and old oil. Puddles pooled in the fractured pavement, their surfaces shivering under the downpour. My boots splashed through the water as I walked, shoulders hunched, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, trying to shut out the cold that seeped through the night. Just another long shift at the shop, just another night. And then I heard it, a sound so thin and fragile it almost vanished beneath the rain. A cry, raw and weak, trembling like something on the edge of breaking. I stopped, listened. The sound came again, higher this time, desperate. It was coming from the shadows of a stack of shipping containers, half swallowed by the dark. Then another cry, and another. Not one, multiple. Kittens. Alone, abandoned, and something inside me shifted. I hesitated for only a second before stepping forward, the cold rain seeping into my collar, my breath coming out in a pale mist. The cries were sharp now, jagged little sobs that clawed at the quiet between the raindrops. As I approached, I caught a flicker of movement beneath a warped metal sheet leaning against the side of the warehouse. Something small, something curled up in the dark. I crouched, reaching out to lift the metal, and the second I did, the sound of tiny bodies scuttling backward filled the air. My breath hitched. There they were, 3 kittens. One, a frail, soot-colored little thing, pressed itself flat against the concrete, its ribs rising and falling too quickly. Another, a ginger-striped tabby, hissed, a pitiful, broken sound, his tiny body puffed up in fear. The third, the smallest of them all, was curled against a torn scrap of cloth, his paws kneading at the empty space beside him. His mouth opened again in that same heartbreaking wail. He was calling for his mother, but the alley was silent. No mother came. The rain had soaked them through, their fur clinging to bony frames. Their eyes, wide, unblinking, shimmered with something that made my throat tighten. Hunger, fear, loss. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't a rescuer, I wasn't a hero, but something in me wouldn't let me walk away. So, against every instinct that told me I should mind my own business, I reached out my hand. The second my hand moved closer, the tabby, Milo, lashed out. His tiny claws swiped at the air, missing me by inches. But the message was clear. Stay back. His fur, despite being soaked through, bristled as he let out another weak, trembling hiss. His brother Jasper barely had the strength to react, his cries growing weaker, throat raw from calling for a mother that wasn't coming. The third kitten, Luna, didn't move at all. I swallowed hard. They were terrified. They had every reason to be. I kept my voice low, careful. Easy, little guy. I'm not going to hurt you. But what did words mean to creatures that had only known the cold, the hunger, the abandonment? I pulled off my jacket, shaking off the rain before slowly lowering it toward them. Milo flinched, his ears pinned back, but he didn't run. That was a bad sign. It meant he was too weak to run. Jasper let out another soft wail, his tiny body shaking as he tried to crawl closer to the fabric, as if it could take the place of the warmth he had lost. Luna barely stirred. I needed to act fast. The warehouse loomed behind me, metal beams groaning under the weight of years. A storm drain gurgled nearby, its dark mouth yawning open, a reminder of how easily small things disappeared in a place like this. If I left them now, they wouldn't last the night. So I made my choice. I had to get them out of here. I scooped Jasper up first. His frail little body barely weighed anything in my hands. He let out a tired mule, but didn't fight me. Too cold, too weak. I tucked him into the warmth of my jacket, feeling the slow, rapid rise and fall of his ribs against my chest. Milo was another story. The fighter. His tiny claws dug into the concrete as I reached for him, eyes locked onto me in pure, unfiltered fear. Come on, buddy. I know you don't trust me, but we don't have time for this. He flattened his ears. I tried again, slower this time, but before I could grab him, a sudden noise ripped through the alley. A deep, guttural growl. Not from a kitten. My pulse spiked. In the darkness behind the shipping containers, something moved. A low silhouette slinked forward, its eyes glinting in the dim light. A stray, bigger than the kittens, lean and hungry. Its fur clung to sharp ribs, its tail flicking in agitation. Not the mother. This was a rogue, a survivor. I had seen cats like this before, animals that had lived too long in the streets, hardened by hunger and the fight to stay alive. It had heard the kittens crying too, and in this world, not every cat came to comfort. I stepped back slowly, heart hammering. Was it here to protect them or take them? Jasper whimpered against my chest. Milo froze. Luna didn't move at all. And then, the stray lunged. The rogue cat lunged, a mess of damp fur and sharp angles, its claws scraping against wet pavement as it came straight for me. I jerked back, my pulse hammering, heart slamming against my ribs. The movement was too quick, too wild, not the wary curiosity of a stray sizing up a human, but something else entirely. This cat was on edge, desperate, and in the cruel, silent language of the streets, I knew what that meant. It had learned to take what it could, no matter the cost. Milo hissed, his tiny body rigid with fear, but he was barely bigger than the rogue's paw. He had fight in him, sure, but no chance of winning. Jasper whimpered weakly against my chest, and Luna didn't even react. I tightened my hold on them, shielding their trembling bodies beneath my jacket. The rogue's yellowed eyes locked onto me, unblinking, ribs shifting beneath its dirty fur as it slinked forward, muscles coiled. It wasn't just warning me anymore, it was making a decision. I had no idea what to do. I wasn't Clara, who could read the way a cat's tail flicked to understand its next move. I wasn't Reggie, who had been feeding strays in this alley longer than I had even lived here. I didn't know how to defuse this, didn't know if I should stand my ground or back away. All I knew was that I couldn't leave the kittens. They were too weak to run, too small to fight, and if I made the wrong move, I'd lose them before I even had a chance to save them. My fingers fumbled inside my pocket, searching for anything that might work. My hand closed around something small, crumbling at the edges. A protein bar, long forgotten, but still wrapped. Food. I tore the wrapper open with my teeth, keeping my movements deliberate, controlled. The rogue's ears twitched at the sound, its pupils dilating as the scent of oats and peanut butter cut through the cold. It hesitated, the rape from its whiskers as it sniffed the air, hunger battling with suspicion in those sharp, feral eyes. I had seconds, maybe less. Shifting my weight slowly, I tossed the bar toward the far end of the alley, the small package landing with a wet thud against the pavement. The rogue's head snapped toward the noise. For a moment it didn't move, its body locked in indecision, claws flexing against the concrete. Then finally, it turned. As it slinked toward the food, I didn't stop to think. I grabbed Milo, scooped up Luna, and ran. My boots splashed through the flooded alley as I pushed forward, the cold biting through my soaked clothes, my grip firm around their tiny, trembling bodies. The wind roared past my ears, drowning out everything else except the frantic hammering of my own heartbeat. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what came next. All I knew was that I had to get them somewhere safe, and I had to do it fast. The wind howled through the alley as I ran, the weight of the kittens pressing against my chest. Rain blurred my vision, cold rivulets streaming down my face, but I didn't stop. I could still hear the rogue behind me, tearing into the protein bar with desperate, hungry bites. It had given me just enough of a head start, but I knew better than to think I was in the clear. If that cat decided it wanted more, if it wanted the kittens back, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop it a second time. I rounded the corner and nearly slipped, my boots skidding against the slick pavement. My breathing was ragged, my pulse thundering in my ears. The streets ahead were empty, nothing but the dull glow of streetlights and the endless stretch of rain-slicked asphalt. I needed a plan. I couldn't take them home. My flat was small, barely enough space for me, and I had nothing, no food, no supplies, nothing warm for them to curl up in. Even if I wanted to, I wasn't prepared. And there was another problem. Clara. She had warned me before, don't interfere unless you know what you're doing. Stray rescues weren't just about picking up an animal and hoping for the best. It was about medical care, rehabilitation, knowing how to handle the sickness, the fear, the trauma. Cats abandoned this young had a slim chance of survival, and without their mother, the odds were even worse. What if they were sick? What if I took them in, only for them to fade away, one by one? Jasper whimpered against my chest, his tiny body shaking, and I swallowed hard. I needed help. A sharp turn led me into another alley, one I recognized instantly, Reggie's alley. A pile of old crates stood stacked against the brick wall near the back, sheltering a small, makeshift feeding station. If anyone knew what to do next, it was him. I slowed my steps, my breath still uneven as I approached, but the alley was silent. too silent. The usual clatter of old tin cans, the telltale sounds of skittering paws, gone. Something was wrong. Then I saw it. The food bowls were overturned, their contents scattered. Deep scratches marred the wooden crates, jagged and wild. Something had been here. Something big. And Reggie was nowhere to be found. I stood in the alley, rain dripping from my hair, my arms aching from holding the kittens so close. The quiet pressed in around me, thick and heavy, the kind that made your skin prickle. Something had happened here. The overturned bowls, the deep scratches in the wooden crates, signs of a struggle, a fight maybe. But where was Reggie? Jasper let out a weak cry against my chest, snapping me back to the moment. I had no time to dwell on things I couldn't fix. I had 3 tiny, helpless creatures depending on me, and right now, they were cold, starving, and barely holding on. My first instinct was to get them out of the rain, but the bigger question loomed over me like a shadow. What the hell was I supposed to do with them? Taking them home felt like an impossible option. My flat was too small, too cold, too unprepared for something like this. I had no litter, no food, nothing but the flimsy jacket wrapped around them. More than that, I had no clue what I was doing. Would I even be able to care for them properly? Would they make it through the night? Then there was Clara. She had spent years working with animals, learning how to help, how to make the tough calls. If anyone would know what to do, it was her. But would she even help? She had warned me before. This wasn't as simple as picking up strays and hoping for the best. There were rules, protocols, and without the right care, these kittens had little chance of surviving. If I brought them to her, she might tell me the hard truth, that I had no business trying to save them, that the most humane thing would be to take them to a shelter, or worse. Milo squirmed in my grip, his tiny body fighting despite his exhaustion. A survivor. Even now, he wouldn't give up. I clenched my jaw, my decision pressing heavy on my chest. Did I take them to Clara and risk hearing the worst? Or did I try to do this on my own, knowing I might fail them? The kittens were watching me now, eyes wide, waiting. I had to decide. The rain had settled into a slow, steady drizzle, coating the streets in a thin sheen that reflected the glow of flickering streetlights. The air smelled of wet concrete and rust, thick with the lingering cold that crept beneath my clothes. I adjusted my grip on the kittens, feeling the way their tiny bodies trembled beneath my jacket. The adrenaline that had kept me moving was beginning to wear off, replaced by a heavy exhaustion that settled deep in my bones. Every muscle ached, but I forced myself to push forward. Clara was my best option, maybe my only one. She would know what to do. Even if she was angry, even if she told me I had no business rescuing kittens when I didn't know what I was doing, she was still the only person I trusted to help. I stepped onto the main road, the alley's silence stretching behind me as I moved through the dimly lit streets. Water dripped from my hair, trailing down my neck, soaking into the already damp collar of my jacket. My boots splashed through shallow puddles, the only real sound in the night, aside from the occasional passing car in the distance. Just a few more blocks and I'd be at Clara's door. I kept walking, trying to push down the creeping worry in my gut that something still felt off. Then I heard it, a noise. Not the wind, not the rain, not the hum of the city beyond the alley, but something deliberate, a scrape, a shuffle, a presence. I slowed my steps, turning my head just enough to glance back over my shoulder. My breath hitched. A shadow moved between the crates, just beyond the reach of the streetlight's glow. For a split second, I thought it was the rogue cat from before, that it had followed me, still hungry, still desperate. But the shape was wrong, too tall, too still. My stomach twisted as the realization set in. Someone was standing in the alley, watching me. Not moving, not making a sound, just waiting in the darkness. The hair on the back of my neck rose as I gripped the kittens a little tighter. My heart pounded, my body stiffening with instinctual unease. The rain blurred the figure's details, but I could feel the weight of their gaze. This wasn't some passerby. This wasn't an accident. Someone was there, and they had been there long enough to see everything. I forced myself to keep walking, every step measured, deliberate, resisting the instinct to turn and run. The kittens stirred slightly beneath my jacket, their small bodies radiating what little warmth they had left, but I barely felt it. My focus was locked on the presence behind me, the figure that hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just stood in the shadows watching. I told myself it could be nothing, just some vagrant seeking shelter from the rain, someone as lost in this cold, empty night as I was. But the stiffness in my shoulders, the way my pulse hammered against my ribs, told me otherwise. I reached the end of the alley and turned onto the main road, blending into the flickering glow of the streetlights. My steps remained steady, though my breathing was shallow, controlled. I needed to get to Clara. That was my only goal. Everything else, the unease curling in my gut, the way the rain felt colder now, sharper, the feeling that I wasn't just being watched but followed, had to wait. I wasn't about to let paranoia make me do something reckless, not with the kitten's survival hanging in the balance. The city stretched ahead, quiet at this hour, only the occasional car rolling through the wet streets, headlights reflecting off puddles like molten gold. The warmth of civilization should have made me feel safer, but it didn't. The moment I passed a storefront with glass windows, I risked a glance at my reflection, eyes flicking past my own drenched silhouette. My stomach tightened. Behind me, just barely visible in the dim light, was a shape moving along the edge of the sidewalk, too far to be coincidence, too close to ignore. I exhaled slowly, tightening my hold on the kittens. If I walked faster, so would they. If I ran, they'd chase me. I needed to be smart. The safest option was still Clara's place. She was only a few blocks away, and if I could just make it there without drawing attention, without letting whoever this was corner me in another alley, I'd have the upper hand. I forced my pace to remain the same, even as my heart pounded. I wasn't just carrying 3 kittens anymore. I was carrying a growing sense of dread. And whoever was behind me, they weren't going away. The closer I got to Clara's, the harder it became to ignore the weight of the footsteps behind me. They weren't loud, weren't hurried, but they were there, steady, deliberate, matching my pace just enough to keep their presence known without making it obvious. It was calculated, intentional. Whoever they were, they wanted me to know I was being followed. The kittens shifted beneath my jacket, and I tightened my grip, the soft warmth of their tiny bodies the only thing grounding me. I needed to think. If I turned too soon, if I let them see I was onto them, they might act. But if I did nothing, if I just walked straight to Clara's without thinking this through, I'd be leading them right to her. I wasn't just responsible for myself anymore. I had the kittens, and now, maybe, Clara too. The street stretched ahead, wet pavement glowing under dim streetlights. Clara's place was 3 blocks away. That was both a comfort and a problem. If I could make it to her door, I'd be safe. But 3 blocks was a long time to be exposed. I needed to know who I was dealing with before I got there. My eyes flicked to a bus stop ahead, a glass shelter slick with rain. Perfect. I adjusted my grip on the kittens and made my move, veering toward it casually like I had just decided to take a break. I slid onto the bench, careful not to jostle the kittens, leaning forward as if I were just tired from walking in the rain. My heart pounded. Now I waited. Seconds stretched into eternity. The rain whispered against the pavement. Then, movement. A figure emerged from the corner of my eye, slowing near the edge of the street. Male, I guessed. Tall, dark jacket, hood pulled low. He hesitated just for a second as if realizing I had stopped. Then he moved again, stepping into the glow of the street lamp. I finally got a clear look at him. My stomach clenched. I knew that face. The moment I saw his face, my breath caught in my throat. Reggie. Of all the people I thought could be following me, he hadn't even crossed my mind. It didn't make sense. Reggie was always at the alley, always near his usual spot, feeding strays like he had been doing for years. He was the one person I expected to be there when I needed help. The one person who should have understood why I couldn't just walk away from the kittens. But instead, he was here, standing in the rain, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Something about him felt off, different from the gruff but predictable man I knew. I kept my grip on the kittens firm, feeling their small, fragile warmth pressing into me as I adjusted my stance. The unease that had been crawling up my spine since I first realized I was being followed tightened its grip. I swallowed hard and forced my voice to stay even. Reggie, didn't expect to see you out here. My words felt thin in the space between us, dampened by the rain and the weight of whatever unspoken thing was hanging in the air. For a long moment, he just stared, Rainwater trickled down the deep lines in his face, his shoulders squared under his soaked coat, his eyes locked onto mine in a way that made my stomach twist. Then at last, he spoke, voice low, words heavy. "You got no idea what you just stepped into, kid." The way he said it sent a chill down my back, colder than the rain soaking through my clothes. My fingers tightened around my jacket as I shifted the kittens slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I kept my tone steady, but my pulse had picked up, hammering beneath my skin. Reggie wasn't just warning me. He was telling me something I wasn't understanding yet. His gaze flicked down to my chest, where the kittens stirred and his jaw clenched. "You should have left him where you found him." The words came out hard, almost bitter, and for a second I thought I had misheard him. I had spent the last hour convincing myself that saving them was the right thing to do, pushing past every doubt, every hesitation, every voice in my head that told me I was out of my depth. And now, standing here in the cold, soaked to the bone, 3 helpless creatures tucked against me, the one person I thought would back me up was telling me I had made a mistake. I shook my head, barely believing what I was hearing. "They would have died, Reggie, you know that." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. The image of the kittens huddled in the rain, their bodies weak and trembling, their cries growing thinner and thinner, flashed in my mind. I had done the only thing I could, the only thing that felt right. Reggie exhaled slowly, looking past me for a moment, as if checking the street. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but it carried the same weight. "Yeah, maybe they would have, but maybe that would have been better." The words hit like a gut punch, leaving a hollow feeling in my chest. My mind reeled, scrambling to make sense of them. There was something else here, something he wasn't saying, and for the first time, I realized that I might not have walked into a simple rescue. I might have walked into something much bigger. The rain had softened to a steady mist, clinging to my skin like a second layer of cold, but I barely noticed it. My focus was locked on Reggie, on the way his jaw tightened, on the tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He wasn't just angry. He wasn't just warning me. He was afraid. I took a slow step forward, adjusting the kittens against my chest, feeling their small, unsteady movements beneath my jacket. My voice was quieter this time, but firm. "What are you trying to say, Reggie? What's going on?" For a moment, he didn't answer, just dragged a hand down his rain-slicked face, exhaling hard. He glanced down the empty street again, like he was expecting someone to be there, like we weren't alone. When he finally spoke, his words came out low and careful. "Those kittens, they weren't just left there, Ethan. That mother cat, Misty, she didn't just disappear." His eyes flicked back to mine, dark with something I couldn't place. "She was taken." The words sent a slow, creeping chill through me, one that had nothing to do with the rain. I swallowed, shifting my stance. "Taken? By who?" Reggie shook his head. "Not who, what?" My stomach turned. "Reggie, you're not making any sense." He sighed, the sound heavy, exhausted. "You ever wonder why so many strays disappear around here? Cats, dogs, hell, even birds sometimes. You ever think about how many come through this alley, how many I've fed, and how many just stop showing up?" His voice was sharp now, but there was something raw underneath it. A frustration, maybe even guilt. "You think they all just run off? You think that's how it works?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had never thought about it like that. Strays came and went. That was just the way things were, wasn't it? Some of them got picked up, some of them didn't make it, but the idea that someone was taking them, hunting them, I hadn't considered it. Reggie must have seen the doubt flicker across my face, because he exhaled sharply and took a step closer. "Listen to me, kid. You don't understand what you've walked into. If you took those kittens, then you've put yourself in the middle of it now, and if they know you have them..." He shook his head. "They'll come looking." My throat went dry. "Who?" Reggie didn't blink. "The people who took their mother." The air between us felt heavier now, thick with something unspoken, something that made the night feel colder than it already was. The rain had dulled to a mist, clinging to my skin, but my body was burning with tension. I could hear my own breathing, steady but too fast, the pulse in my throat thrumming like a warning. My grip on the kittens tightened, their fragile warmth the only thing keeping me grounded. Reggie was serious, dead serious, and that scared me more than anything else. He had always been the one who didn't flinch, didn't buy into rumors, didn't let anything shake him. But right now, he looked at me like I had already made a mistake I couldn't take back. The thought lodged itself in my chest, pressing down like a weight. I forced my voice to stay steady, even though my insides were tightening. "Who are they? Reggie? What do they want?" Reggie shook his head, his jaw locked, like he was debating how much to tell me. "I don't know everything, but I know enough to tell you that these kittens," he gestured toward my jacket, his fingers tightening into a fist, "they aren't just some random strays. Their mother was targeted, taken. And if you have them now, that means they're gonna come for you too." The words settled deep in my bones, an icy dread spreading through my limbs. This wasn't just about saving them anymore. It wasn't just about whether or not I could take care of them, whether or not I had made the right call by stepping in. It was about survival, theirs and mine. My mind raced, turning over possibilities, trying to find a way out of this that didn't involve handing them over to whatever threat was waiting just beyond the edge of the night. But there wasn't one. If I kept them, I was inviting danger. If I gave them up, I was sending them straight into the hands of whatever had taken their mother. Reggie must have seen the decision forming in my eyes because he exhaled, his shoulders sagging. "If you're gonna do this, kid, you need to be smart. You need to be ready." His voice dropped lower, more urgent. "You need to disappear." The weight of the choice settled over me. There was no turning back now. I had set something in motion the second I reached for them in that alley. And now, there was only one thing left to do. I met Reggie's gaze, steady despite the storm inside me. "Then help me." The night felt different now, heavier, like the city itself was holding its breath. The rain had eased, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the dim streetlights, but the chill in the air had nothing to do with the weather. My mind was a blur of movement, already trying to piece together a plan, already trying to figure out what it meant to disappear. Because that's what it had come down to. If I wanted to keep these kittens safe, I had to disappear. Reggie didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, watching me, maybe waiting for me to back down, to say I had changed my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. Jasper stirred against my chest, letting out the softest, weakest mewl, and that was all it took to solidify my decision. There was no turning back now. Reggie finally sighed, running a hand down his face like he was exhausted just thinking about what came next. "I know a place. It's not much, but it'll keep you off the radar for now." His voice was quieter than before, resigned, like he had already accepted that I wasn't going to do the smart thing and walk away. "But if we do this, you listen to me. No questions, no second guessing. You do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. You understand me?" I nodded, my throat tight. It was strange how quickly my world had shifted. A few hours ago, I was just some guy finishing a long shift at the shop, passing through a familiar alley on my way home. And now I was standing in the middle of an empty street, 3 fragile lives tucked against my chest, preparing to disappear into the shadows. It didn't feel real, but at the same time, it felt like the only thing that had ever mattered. Reggie turned, motioning for me to follow, and I did, stepping into the unknown without hesitation. Maybe I wasn't ready for this. Maybe I wasn't the kind of person who was supposed to do something like this. But none of that mattered now, because I had made my choice. And whatever was coming next, I was ready. The rain may have stopped, but the questions are far from answered. What really happened to the mother cat? Who was behind her disappearance? And now that Ethan has made his choice, can he truly protect the kittens from whatever is coming next? If this story has made you think twice about what it really means to step in and help, then you're not alone. Rescuing isn't just about picking up an animal and bringing it home. It's about responsibility, sacrifice, and sometimes facing dangers you never expected. But one thing is certain, Ethan's journey is only just beginning. So what would you have done in his place? Would you have taken the kittens, even knowing the risk? Or would you have walked away, never knowing what might have happened next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if like this amazing rescue journey, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss amazing rescue stories like this one. Because some choices change lives forever. And for Ethan and these kittens, there's no turning back now.